You are listening to Serenity Radio Network on Jerry Royce Live Worldwide at PositivePower21.org. We thank you for joining us. You can also find us on Elation Radio. Serenity is a Christian-based multicultural empowerment station that focuses on the mind, body, and spirit. The program specializes in bringing to the listeners the very best from the healing arts community on the subjects of self, health care, spiritual healing, and kingdom living. Serenity Radio is sponsored by the Serenity Weight Loss and Detoxification Program. To enroll, contact Michelle Edmonds, a.k.a. the Godmother, at 404-445-8579, or hit them up on Facebook at Serenity Weight Loss. The next voice that you hear will be that of our awesome host.
Hey everyone, welcome to Serenity Radio Network. This is our podcast entitled The 7 Top Reasons for the Weight Loss Stall. Now, the one thing I love about this topic is that it is an area actually that many people don't cover. You would think that in weight loss this would be the one thing that they would discuss, but it is not talked about very often. It's always 30 pounds in 30 days or something really exciting that way, but never really the stuff that's going on underneath. And so what I want to do is we're going to cover this program in 2 parts. We're going to do, for this call, we're going to do probably I'll get through 3, and then part 2 we'll do the balance. Now, as you know, this broadcast is primarily targeted to the current enrollees of the Serenity Weight Loss and Detoxification Program. My name is Michelle Edmonds, and I am the coach. However, as you know, we've invited and opened it up to guests. We hope you enjoy what you hear, but we are going to share the link primarily with current enrollees. Reason number 1. A toxic colon or constipation. Now, I guess the best way to start with this is to ask, where does your fat go when you lose it? It doesn't matter how you've released it, whether it be Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers. It really doesn't matter how the weight was taken off. The point is, you need to know that whenever you lose weight, the fat cells break down, pass through your liver for processing, and are then released through your colon. Simply stated, fat comes out in your stool. Now, I recognize that a discussion about feces is not a very popular activity to many. It's not a very pretty subject. However, it is our belief that this important bodily function not only needs increased attention, but that people actually want more education about it. You have to remember, Serenity actually started within the vegetarian cafe that was located within our vitamin store, our retail walk-in vitamin store in Hempstead, New York. And we actually started in 1992. And right in the middle of everyone eating veggie burgers and sipping on smoothies, I began, for lack of space, I began teaching on colon cleansing. And lo and behold, before my husband and I knew it, we would look outside and we had a line literally outside the door. So clearly people want more education about it. If nothing else, don't you think it is important to know where the lost pounds have gone? In fact, have you been on other diets and weight loss plans where the subject of waste elimination was part of your weight loss education? Has that ever happened? Well, a discussion on stool frequency is probably our best starting point. A properly functioning intestinal tract releases a very bulky stool a minimum of 2 to 3 times per day, or very large volume in the morning. Now, it's not unusual if you're just starting a detoxification program that is structured like ours, that if you don't flush, you may see as much stool that exceeds the water limit. That's not unusual. But don't fear. Don't get too excited. You're okay. You're not sick. Diabetics and individuals with a colon disorder, such as diverticulitis, irritable bowel syndrome, or what I would call anyone with a hypersensitive colon, cannot use this criteria. The criteria is once very large volume release per day, or 2 to 3 times per day releasing smaller quantities. This criteria cannot be used by diabetics and people who have sensitive colons, as I said, because it is more likely in the case of diabetics an indication that the blood sugar is elevated. The body uses the stool or the urine to release itself of excess sugar in the blood or elevated blood sugar, especially when abdominal weight is present. Nevertheless, misinformation is the root cause of considerable confusion. Some very traditionally trained medical professionals will advise that what's regular is whatever is regular for you. Thus, based on this theory, a normal individual may pass stool once every 2 weeks or once per month and still meet the criteria for normal. As evidenced by the number of laxatives and things to help regularity fibers that are on the market, it is safe to assume that you are not going as often as you should and probably haven't been for a very, very long time. Remember, fat is a toxin that is released in the stool. It does not mean that there are no slender, constipated people. It does mean that every overweight person is constipated. I hope that makes sense. Any parent can tell you via the number of diaper changes how often a baby releases stool. This childlike regularity continues until the child becomes mature enough to understand their parents' verbal command to hold it until we get home. As a child learns to hold it, they become increasingly constipated. As an adult, you give yourself the same command as you busy yourself with shopping and work and other seemingly more important activities. Also, remember, especially for women, using the bathroom in public is really seen as a no-no. This typically starts in high school when you're mortified at the thought of releasing your stool in the bathroom in school. Nevertheless, toxins find some place to go. They will escape from the colon through the colon membranes into the blood supply, polluting the entire body. This is why many alternative healthcare practitioners will advise that all disease has its root in the colon. Now, primary pollutants of the colon are the foods that we eat: white bread, white pasta, refined sugar, dairy products, and insufficient water intake. But herein lies the problem. The reason colon toxicity is related to weight gain. As stated previously, most of our body fat is toxic too. And like the other toxins in our body, when it has no place to go, it gets returned into the bloodstream and converts back into fat, where it gets stored in various tissues and organs of the body. Excess fat stored in the liver is referred to as high cholesterol. Fat stored in the gallbladder is a precursor to gallstones. Excess fat in the blood causes sticky blood and leads to cardiovascular problems. It now becomes apparent why successful long-term weight loss must be rooted with a supervised, structured internal detoxification program, which includes elimination of toxins from the liver, gallbladder, and, of course, the colon. However, if you do a detoxification program, please bear in mind, if it does not start with the colon, it is not a good one, because although the kidneys and the blood need to be cleansed, the organs all converge and release their toxins into the colon. And if that channel has not been cleared, the toxins have no place to go but to bubble back up into your bloodstream, reabsorbed by the kidneys, by the liver, and the gallbladder. I hope that makes sense. The takeaway for reason number 1 is fat is a toxin that is released in the stool for everyone. It doesn't matter how you released it, doesn't matter how much weight, 2 pounds, 40, 50 pounds. It always comes out in the stool. All right, let's move on to reason number 2. Now, reason number 2 is systemic yeast infections. I'm going to read some scriptures for you. I bet you didn't even know these were in the Bible. 1 Corinthians 5:7, purge the old leaven, that you may be fresh dough, still uncontaminated. 1 Corinthians 5 and 8. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, nor with leaven of vice and malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of purity and sincerity and unadulterated truth. Well, gee, that sounds like a mind-body-spirit connection to me, don't it to you? And yet I thought we were talking about yeast. Well, the Bible somehow interweaves a conversation about yeast, dough, and wickedness, and purity of mind and heart. Well, isn't that a coincidence? Well, let's look a little bit closer. Well, interestingly, the scriptures recognize that yeast was a toxin that needed to be purged from the body. Yeast, also known as leaven, is referred to at least 37 times in the Bible, and nearly every reference admonishes the reader to get rid of it. Scriptural references to yeast are symbolic to corruption, sin, pride, being puffed up as leaven, and adherence to false doctrine. We could include weight loss plans that encourage dieting and advice that you can eat whatever you want as examples of false doctrine. Contrary to popular belief, yeast, also known as candida, that's Candida, is not just a female problem, and yet another area where men are often wrongfully excluded. Yeast in the body most often manifests as a white cottage cheese-like discharge. It grows in the colon and it spreads throughout the body. It can cause vaginitis, as well as sinusitis, jock itch, acne, severe fatigue, brain fog, constipation, and weight gain. Dr. Orion Truss, that's Truss, was one of the first pioneers to write about the yeast and the devastating effects that it can have on the body. In his book, The Missing Diagnosis, he discusses not only the symptoms listed on the chart, but a case study illustrating how even multiple sclerosis was cured in his clinical practice by placing the patient on an anti-yeast regimen. Despite much criticism and a lack of support for his research, initially, Dr. Truss's work changed my life as the coach drastically when I discovered that I was plagued with symptoms of severe candidiasis throughout young adulthood. In fact, for all those who are listening, my yeast problem as your coach and the author of this program is rooted primarily in a yeast problem or a terrible problem with candidiasis. That is the sole genesis of this program to this day. Now, while you may need to purge yourself of sin and pride, the primary focus for this rule is the impact that yeast has on the physical body. Let me give you a laundry list of some common yeast overgrowth symptoms. And let me know, write it down if you can. If you have paper and pen, jot some down. Depression. I know that may surprise you. You might be thinking, what? Depression? A side effect of excess yeast in the colon and vaginal canal and intestinal tract? Yes, depression. Of course, chronic vaginal yeast infections, jock itch, anxiety, of course, constipation, asthma or sinusitis, indigestion, bloating, especially after sugar consumption, irritability, hyperactivity, chronic cystitis, dysmenorrhea, which is painful menstrual cycle, rashes such as eczema, and acne. At the time that this program was started, meaning the Serenity program, 90% of over the 7,000 clients that we saw within the first couple of years, 90% had symptoms of yeast overgrowth. Simultaneously, almost none of our clients knew anything about yeast overgrowth at the time that they enrolled in the program. So why a discussion on yeast in a weight loss program? Well, it is a pervasive health problem and extremely prevalent amongst overeaters. This is because The yeast organism thrives on the foods that overweight individuals love. Thus, after the initial startup weight loss phase, a client will suddenly experience excruciating cravings just when they are at the peak of their weight loss program. Yeast loves all forms of sugar, dairy, vinegar, and alcohol. Thus, it becomes apparent that if your weight loss program does not correct for yeast overgrowth in the body, it is positioning you for failure. So why does this happen? Yeast organisms die when they are not fed. In other words, when the host, meaning you, discontinues eating the foods that help them to survive, they die off. This phenomena, called yeast die-off, is also referred to as Herxheimer's reaction. And it is during this yeast die-off stage that an individual will ironically experience a worsening of their symptoms that the yeast overgrowth problem was causing initially. This sets the stage for cheating, or a nicer way to put that is sabotaging. However, we've also observed that people with yeast overgrowth have thyroid hormone deficiencies. Now, we're going to talk more about that later, but the irony is, I think you're catching it. Look at the vicious cycle that we have. Yeast feeds off of sugar and carbs and alcohol. Not eating it causes yeast die-off, which gives you cravings to eat more yeast. But the yeast problem also goes to the thyroid gland, which is partly responsible for how well and how efficiently we burn fat. So now we got this vicious cycle going of yeast, correcting of yeast, the thyroid gland being slowed down because of the yeast, back to more yeasty products because now we're depressed and we're not losing weight. And around we go. Well, can you detoxify yeast from your body? Well, let's see. Well, the bad news, of course, you know what's coming. You got to let go of the sugar, the alcohol, and the dairy from your diet because these are the foods that yeast organisms crave. And notice, it is also consistent with the paleo lifestyle. It is not, however, consistent with the ketogenic diet because the ketogenic diet, although it is basically paleo, the one major difference is the increase in use of fats. However, they do espouse the use of dairy-based fats. The reason why we do not follow ketogenic eating as a primary lifestyle is, number one, it is not paleo. It is not the way man ate first, which is also caveman. And number two, because it does not address the yeast factor in the weight loss stall. I hope that makes sense. Now, so what do we do to get rid of yeast? We already talked about what you must eliminate, but what can you do to add to your program? Well, we are an anti-yeast mucusless diet program. However, there are specific items that you can use. One, Serenity has what we call a yeast detox kit that some of you will be told to use one or two of those items as you progress through your parasite cleanse. One item that we use is caprylic acid. That's CAPRYLIC acid, and it comes from coconut. It is a highly effective supplement that relieves your body of excess yeast. Another product that we use is called Yeast Away, which contains other ingredients and various forms of acidophilus. Be careful on your selections of acidophilus, everyone, because there are many forms that die immediately upon consumption, and some of it's dead when you buy it. So be very careful and talk to me before you purchase a form of acidophilus. If you are a Serenity team member currently enrolled, I, of course, will let you know when we get to that stage of the program. But acidophilus essentially crowds out the excess yeast in the intestinal tract and helps to prevent the return of the yeast overgrowth problem as well. We are going to number this number 3, reason for the weight loss stall. It is actually a close cousin to yeast, but I separated the two because this section is called parasite infections. Many of you know that we are, as part of our fall cleanse, starting our parasite detox as we speak. But for those of you that are not enrolled in the program, we will typically do a parasite cleanse no less than twice a year, and you get full instructions on how to walk through and what products to use. But let's talk a little bit about what the heck are parasites. Now, I hope everyone listening to this broadcast have already eaten, because I'm about to talk about some things that might make you a little squirmy. Yes, pun intended. But first of all, let's be real. Everybody has bugs up their butt. So now let me get serious. What are some of the types of parasites that you might see in humans known as hosts that are often in the forms of worms? Well, one that I really want to make sure that we cover is called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori, a seldom diagnosed bacteria that is a primary root cause of peptic ulcers and acid reflux. If you have acid reflux and you have not been able to get rid of it, it's just been so stubborn, really be suspicious that you have H. pylori. Now, flukes is another, called a flatworm, that can range in size from a very large intestinal fluke to a microscopic blood fluke. Blood flukes have the ability to migrate to the brain, causing neurological symptoms. Now, that's very serious. And you would think, my God, if any worm or parasite can cause neurological symptoms, how come our doctors don't talk about this? Well, that's kind of my point. Intestinal flukes, and we have pictures, if you're a current enrollee, you'll see pictures of many of the parasites that I'm talking about floating around in our chat room or embedded in the invite for this broadcast. If you're not an enrollee, hey, stop sitting on the side and get on board. But intestinal flukes are contracted through unwashed vegetables, fish, and pork. They also thrive off of propyl alcohol, which can assist them in their development once contracted. That's very interesting, because it is thought alcohol is always an antiseptic. But here you're being told that propyl alcohol actually facilitates their absorption through the skin through the use of cosmetics and deodorants. Now, here is the caveat. Most cosmetics and deodorant contain propyl alcohol. And so that means that the use of your everyday cosmetic or your everyday underarm deodorant is also what is helping you to absorb intestinal flukes into your bloodstream. Another is a tapeworm. Now, this is fairly uncommon, but we have to make sure that you know that we're not talking about a third world problem. And by the way, as a sidebar, I'm not sure where the third world is anyway, but I want to make sure as we launch this conversation about parasites that we're not talking about something that's going on in another country. Tapeworms, however, are not as common as some of the microscopic parasites, but tapeworms, the problem is, can live in the body for as long as 25 years and can grow to as long as 33 feet in length, releasing up to 1 million eggs per day. This has incredible implications on the body, where it is conceivable that you can have a parasite with something as large as this residing in your system for up to 25 years and not even know it. That has enormous implications on your health. Now, since Serenity has started, we've had 7 bona fide sightings of tapeworm, meaning the person released it during a parasite cleanse or release a partial. Now, please bear in mind, most of you, when you're doing your parasite cleanse, most of you will snip off a piece of parasite. Very rarely, in fact, never, will you sit down and release an entire tapeworm. And so what's more often going to be the case is you'll snip off only a fragment of it. The problem is the balance of it may still be in your system. In fact, probably is. And only maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 inches may be out in the toilet. And so that's why it's very, very important for you to have it tested like these team members did. They actually used a glove, scooped it up, took it to their doctor, who then sent it to the lab, and it was verified as a bona fide tapeworm. Then the person went to the doctor and they either had surgery, which I'm not for, but in some cases they did have surgery. In all other cases, meaning all the other 6, actually came back to me, and we did some herbs and more colon cleansing, and we released more pieces of the tapeworm until we were able to retest and confirm that it was all out of the body. What did our elders and Native Americans know about parasites? Well, apparently more than we gave them credit for. For instance, have you ever been cautioned by your grandmother to stop playing in the dirt? Don't eat the dirt, she would caution. Take your hands out of your mouth. These parental directives, often yelled from the front porch or a window, were rooted in the fear that children would not only get dirty, but they would ingest parasites. Many individuals, especially elders, living in the southern region of the USA, are familiar with tapeworms, and they recall hearing of persons who ate argo, laundry starch, dirt, or sheetrock. Do you ever remember hearing that? These peculiar behaviors are specific to a severe tapeworm infestation. However, again, it is not just the tapeworm, and it is more likely not to be just tapeworm. It is more likely to be microscopic little organisms that are worm-like that are driving these peculiar behaviors. Again, laypersons have proven they were smarter than we thought. So, are parasites really a problem today? Well, about 44 million pregnant women have hookworm infections, which can cause chronic blood loss from the intestines and severe iron deficiency. In spite of the silence on this subject, the number of human parasite infestations are increasing. In developing countries, it is predicted that by the year 2025, more than half of the population will be infected with some sort of parasite. Most important is that parasites can no longer be dismissed as a problem in the third world, addressed in medical schools under the topic of tropical diseases. In fact, it is this arrogant neglect that has caused the proliferation of parasite-borne infections and disease in this country. Scabies, crabs, even bed bugs are all examples of parasitic infections that are relatively common and increasingly epidemic in the U.S. What are some symptoms of parasite? If you got a paper and pen, I think you might want to write this down. The top of the list: weight gain, a long history of chronic anemia, teeth grinding, digestive disturbances, chronic diarrhea, or constipation, colitis or irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS, intestinal gas or very foul-smelling gas, greasy stools, nausea and vomiting, rashes that are unexplained, allergies, itchy butt, snoring. Yes, you may think you have a sleep apnea, but do you know snoring might be also parasites, anemia, and chronic fatigue. Protozoan infections have been associated from everything from arthritis, diabetes, to multiple sclerosis. And now your coach, also diagnosed with MS, was indeed diagnosed with a parasite called Cryptosporidium. So if any of you listening out there who have been diagnosed with MS, please be tested. The CDC will be glad to make sure that you find a lab near you that does this test. Test yourself for Cryptosporidium because it is seen as one of the parasites that is the root underlying cause for multiple sclerosis. So, why a parasite detox in a weight loss program? Well, in a typical approach to weight loss, a discussion of parasites does not occur at all. However, after reviewing the above information that we've just discussed, You are probably wondering why your previous weight loss program didn't mention parasites as a probable interference with your weight loss efforts. In fact, you're probably wondering why your doctor never mentioned parasites with regard to your overall health. This and other omissions underscores the reasons for the approach to weight loss and wellness that we discuss on these podcasts. It is my intent to bring these important underlying factors for why your weight loss stalls and why overall your whole person health is rooted in identifying some of these sleeping causes. Now, anything that eats off of you is going to cause you to overeat. That's the bottom line. That's your answer to why are we discussing weight loss and parasites. I'm going to repeat. Anything that eats off of you is going to cause you to overeat. Ask any pregnant woman to recall the changes in her appetite while she was pregnant. In the womb, the baby is like a parasite. As it extracts nourishment from the mother, it causes the mother to become deficient in certain nutrients if she is not very careful to eat correctly. Cravings are a signal to the host, which is you, the human. It is a signal from the brain that nutrients are needed. Of course, we don't realize this, and so we just start grabbing unhealthy foods at peculiar times. Rarely does a pregnant woman ask for fish, salad, and broccoli. Obviously, this difference between parasites and a baby is that parasites are always unwanted. Nevertheless, the important point to remember is that both take nutrients from the body that can result in cravings, overeating, and malnutrition. Well, how do you get rid of parasites? Parasites like intestinal worms, intestinal blood flukes, bacteria, viruses exist all over the world. However, it has always been an integral part of the American Indian, African, and Southern African American culture to know how to use nature's pharmacy, particularly as it pertains to parasites. Ancestral lay remedies may include spoonfuls of molasses, sulfur, and the consumption of raw garlic. Remember that? And onions. Remember the garlic around the neck? That is rooted in ridding the body of parasites. I bet you didn't realize that. Other herbs proven effective include yellow dock, used specifically for ringworm. May apple is a worm expellent and is available in homeopathic form from any alternative medical practitioner, including myself. Olive oil is a common mainstay of old school parasite detox programs. The parasite detoxification kits that we use will include some of the above, but will almost always include the herbs wormwood, cloves, and black walnut. Also grapefruit and pumpkin seed as an herb, not as a fresh fruit. Of course, fiber is used all along with products that restore good bacteria in the colon, such as acidophilus. A variety of excellent formulations are used for individuals suspected to have advanced parasitic infections or H. pylori. Bentonite clay in liquid form is taken orally, and it's very effective for preventing future parasites and mopping up waste excreted by existing parasites in the intestinal tract. Liquid garlic enemas are extremely helpful, as are coffee enemas. So that, in a nutshell, everyone, is essentially what we do for a parasite cleanse. We're in the middle of that now. Our time is up. I've gone just 30 minutes, and so we're going to continue part 2 during this second broadcast, when we'll cover 4 more of the 7 top hidden causes for the weight loss stall. And for this first part, just to recap, we discussed constipation and colon toxicity. We also discussed systemic yeast infections, and number 3, parasites, which also includes all forms of worms. That's all for today. We appreciate so many of you coming out to listen to this, and we will be back for part 2. Same back channel, same time. Thanks so much, everyone. We appreciate you. And may the peace you seek in this world you find first within yourself. God bless. Good night.
If you see me walking down the street and I start to cry each time we meet, walk on by, walk on by. Make believe that you don't see the tears, just let me grieve in private, 'cause each time I see you I break down and cry. Walk on by. Never, baby, walk on by. I just can't get over losing you. So if I seem broken and low, walk on by. Step on, step on, step on, step on foolish pride. That's all that I have left, so let me hide the tears and the sadness you gave me when you said goodbye. Walk on by. Step. Keep saying, baby, walk on. Step, walk on by. Keep saying, baby, walk on. Step, walk on by. Keep saying, baby, walk on. Step, walk on by. Keep saying, baby, walk on. Walk on. I just can't get over losing you. So if I see